So let's give a round of applause and a warm welcome to Lewis and Jake. Come on stage, guys.
That was a really exciting time for us when Jake had an idea that was essentially his idea from his own experience as a Year 12 school leaver, needing some money to go to schoolies and party pretty hard. Jake thought there'd be a website that would be able to let him do some labouring work, I think you were looking for at the time. And to his shock and horror, there was no SpotJobs at the time, and he thought, well, there's a gap here, and he spoke to me about that, and I was of the same view that why isn't there a site that caters to this? It just makes so much sense. And Seek, obviously, as you probably know, is much more career focused, and the more research we did and the more we looked into it, the more we spoke to our own circle of influence, our own network, and asked, does this idea make sense to you? Everyone said yes, which was pretty surprising to me, because I'd had ideas in selling shirts and helping farmers buy and sell livestock, and all these ideas, everyone could tell me why it wouldn't work. And SpotJobs was the most common feedback was there must be already something like that. So that gave us a pretty strong impetus to push on, and Jake and I decided to commit to the project full time. And I said to Jake, so we're 50-50 on this, yeah? And he said, yeah.
That's my first mistake.
And live and learn. And then, so from that day forward, we picked a number of a dollar figure that we needed to raise to launch the business, which was $2.5 million, and we didn't waver from that. And then we sort of got head down and developed our concept and our pitch and the concept for what SpotJobs is today, essentially, and really went about town trying to get investors to share our vision for what SpotJobs would become and fill the gap that we really saw was there. And most importantly, we got people to believe that we were capable to achieve that vision and believe in Jake and I, if not as much, probably more so than the concept of SpotJobs, which was a really important lesson for us, is that we learnt that when people shared our vision, it was because they wanted to see us succeed and help us execute the vision. Because we knew it was a good idea because everyone told us that, but most importantly, it was validated by those who had put money into the SpotJobs account to make it start. Our situation is pretty unique. We actually raised that money on an idea. We had no prototype, no concept, no wireframes, no nothing. We had an iPad.
Wow.
And the two of us, which we were good salespeople, and we are. So, and that was probably the most important thing about securing the funding, but also once we had it, because that's only the start of the journey. Once you have the money, that's stepping stone number one, and then the real challenge begins from there. So that's what carried us through that part of the journey. But yeah, we had no MVP, we had no website. We had the concept of SpotJobs, why it was going to work, and why we were the people to make it happen.
We then took that to a family friend of Lewis's, and fortunately we discussed the idea with them, and they sort of thought, well, hold on, this might not be a bad opportunity, and we're able to get a foot in the door. And I think that's probably the hardest thing when you're starting out. And I was speaking to someone earlier, and she was asking, how did you start out and get that first round of capital? Who did you know? And we were very fortunate. We had a gentleman helping us who acted as a mentor to Lewis and I, and really guided us through the process of exactly, basically it worked out pretty much dollar for dollar in the end of what we needed, how we were going to spend it, how long it would take. And like I said, fortunately we had a warm handshake in the door to a wealthy family in Melbourne, and we presented to them, which was a unique experience given the fact that I think I was 21 and Lewis was 23, and as is usually the case, it was actually quite funny. Lewis was doing a lot of the talking, and I was sitting there, and I sort of tuned out, and there were a lot of people in the room, and I only tuned out because I was actually crunching the numbers of everyone. I was going, okay, you're worth that, you're worth that, you're worth that. I don't even own a car, and I got to multiples of a couple of $100 million as well. So it was a daunting experience to start with, but thankfully we did have each other, and that's something that without getting too deep and meaningful, you are lucky. You are lucky to have someone to share the experience with, because a lot of the time there are a lot worse, a lot more down times, I think, or a lot more difficult times than the good times. So you do share the wins together, which is great having someone to share them with as opposed to being solo, I guess.
I think that we are both, in any good partnership, bring shared vision, but also different, separate qualities and attributes, and that's what's come together. And thus far, has worked really well. So I think that, definitely without the right partner, it makes things a lot harder. Raising the money's one thing, but that's when work starts, because you make a lot of promises and people get excited about the opportunity you're presenting, and you need to always be clear that investors are investors because they're investing for a return on their investment, not because they like you or they like the idea. They're all factors that make the investment happen, but unless you deliver on what you promise, it's all academic. There's no warm fuzzy feeling for the idea that you as a founder have. So you need to remember that and expect investors to be harsh on you when you don't meet the projections or expectations that you set or that they invest on. So it's not easy or not fun all the time once you start business, because you've got expectations to meet. And that was a really good lesson for Jake and I learned in the early days, because we weren't quite prepared for that, I suppose, given the nature of people that we had on and still have on our share registry. These people expect results, and it was a good kick up the arse many times to be reminded of that.
From the early days when Lewis and I first started speaking, the business has continually evolved along the way, and that's something that's been really important for us to make sure that as the market has changed and evolved, so has SpotJobs. I think in the early days we started off and we were discussing a casual part-time style job board, and now we've evolved or morphed into a entry to mid-level job board that also offers education opportunities to our users as well. And I think where Lewis and I were lucky is the fact that we're targeting a group of people who are entry to mid-level qualified. Our core or age is roughly sort of our average age is 28. Our core demographic is between 20 and 30. So for us, obviously we fit that demographic. So it was and the idea came from something that we actually felt, both of us felt and knew that there was a gap in the market. So the product really grew from what was in our heads. We got it all out on paper, flushed the idea, flushed out exactly what we thought would be useful for our users. And because we were in that demographic of, just before we started SpotJobs, we were looking for these types of jobs. It was really useful for us to be able to have that experience and go, okay, well, we know this is what people want. We didn't really need to do that much user feedback because we were the users essentially. Our friends were the users, people we knew were the users. So that's essentially where the product started and evolved. I think today we probably leave it to smarter people than Lewis and I to enhance the product these days, but that's where we started, and now obviously we have a team of people which help us with user testing and different things like that to make sure that we are, I suppose, creating the right product.
We took a lot of time and care to get the brand right, and we were incredibly fastidious about the logo. I mean, this is what you see here. It might be dagged by now, but geez, we spent about 1,000 hours on that and different variations to make sure it was exactly what this thing in our head would actually materialise like. So brand was everything to me personally, and then that was even further extended once we had the resources to put that brand on TV ads and billboards and sponsorships and digital ads and Facebook ads and everywhere else. So the marketing, it's been a really important thing. It's nice to hear your feedback that you know what SpotJobs is, you understand our brand without having to spend, having to see 130-second commercials to articulate what we do. And that's, by design. We've really tried to, there's not that many domain names out there left, that wasn't easy to find. And then actually getting the message across, through TV ads in the first 2 years we were on air, nearly every day, and we really backed ourselves for that to work, and it did. And we've got nearly, closing in on 1 million registered users now, which is, a lot of it's come through TV advertising and all the other forms of marketing that we do. So it's worked, but it's not easy to get right. And we think we have, but we can't really compare it to anything else because we just don't know how else it could have gone.
I think as well, in addition to that, we really probably bucked the trend a little bit at the time in terms of the advertising that we were doing. I think when you speak to a lot of people, and I'm not saying again this is right or wrong, this was just the path that we chose. Everyone's like social media, digital, social media. No one watches TV, no one watches paper, no one reads papers anymore. Well, that's not true. Maybe not as many people as there once was, but I think that the Herald Sun still gets bought by 800,000 people every Saturday or Sunday. So people still do read papers and people still do watch TV. And for us, that was a really good communication method to attract the type of people that we wanted. And once we found out the type of programs that our users were watching, we then implemented a strategy to continually utilise TV as a really effective marketing method to grow our database. And thankfully, we did that in a quick time.
We put ads in Big Brother.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And the Saturday night movie, which everyone's seen 5 times. That's great to get people who are not engaged in watching the TV and getting on their phones or tablets. So it seemed to work for us.
You can get you know that 1 million, 1.34 if you're lucky, million people will be watching your real prime time spot, and you pay for that. But 1.4 million people just saw your brand for 30 seconds. And if your ad's good, you tell those people what you do. And if your product's good, they'll come and do business with you. So we calculated the ROI on all of that, and we figured out if we spend $1, we might get $1.20 back, and that's been a really important thing for us to learn, and also to grow a brand really fast. SpotJobs is only under 3 years old since we launched the business, and it's nearly 20% of the country have been to our website in that time, which probably wouldn't have happened if we had tried to grow organically and not risk. I suppose that the concept on spending a lot of money really fast to grow the brand and to test to see whether it works or it doesn't, and so that's essentially what us as founders and our shareholders were obviously had an appetite for risk. We're aware of the fact that this is either going to be a big success or a big flop and cost us a lot of money. So now it's proven to they're still clinging on to hope of something happening.
I think we've certainly been guilty of exactly what you mentioned, thinking of different things that we can put on the website, adding on certain things here, there and everywhere, and we did that, and was the return there? Probably not. And then unfortunately, like Lewis touched on before, we had a CEO in Glenn Smith come on board, and then we had Thomas Shaw, who's a genius, and pretty much now we go to Thomas and say, can we have this? And more often than not, he says no, or tells us to get out. So we leave it to him these days to work out where the actual return on the investment of changing something on the website is, but we're certainly guilty of wasting time and money, I think, probably in our early days with what we wanted to change because we thought it either looked cool or maybe someone might use it.
Or a friend suggested it. Yeah, I mean, in the early days we had a product specialist. Jake and I were the product managers and the sales managers and the marketing directors and the founders and everything else's. So product fell under our umbrella too, and you'd sort of just, you'd waste a lot of time and money implementing ideas, and you're so agile in that early stage venture period that you can come into the office and go, let's do this, and 3 weeks later it's deployed and live. And as our business has grown, we're able to let the return on that time be calculated by people who can tell us whether it's worth it or not, and specialists come into those roles. But fortunately we got a lot of those decisions right because we stuck around and remained. But geez, we've developed some crap stuff, Jake.
We now, I suppose, understand the type of person we need a lot better. We understand the types of skills gaps that we have in the company, and I think as you do grow, you start to move away from, I think in your early days, it's basically all hands on deck, and if you know someone who knows someone who knows someone, great, let's get them in because we need the resources and we need the particular type of person. But as you continue to grow, you work out that you do have skills gaps, and it can't just be a friend of a friend anymore. You need to identify the right person because, as Lewis touched on, it can be a costly exercise to have the wrong person come in for 3 months and then work out a way to remove them for the next 3 months. So we've certainly learned a lot from the gentleman down the back there who looks after us a lot these days.
Yeah, I think less so the technology, more so the brand positioning, making sense of the marketplace. You know, the SpotJobs platform was different because it had to be, but at the end of the day, we're just an online classified doing the same thing Seek does, but our communication is more targeted to 20 to 30-year-olds. So the website, yeah, we try to keep up and be ahead of the curve there, but what's most important to us is that the SpotJobs brand makes sense to people who drive past the billboard to see the TV ad. That's what our purpose is, and we try to convey that as hard as we can so that people understand why we exist and what value they'll get from advertising jobs on our website or looking for opportunities to work on SpotJobs. So technology is just you know, a vehicle to facilitate that outcome that we try to achieve. So that's our philosophy.
I think, though, on that, I know there's probably some people sitting there and go, well, if you had no money, how do you afford to basically put on a contractor to create the IM? And that would be one of my questions if I was sitting in the audience. How do people do things if they've got no money to start with? So I think the first time that we did a pitch, we asked for a really, really small amount of money that would then lead on to the more substantial investment. And what that really small sum allowed us to do was basically create a professional pitch and go out and get that contractor, which Lewis touched on, and move away from a PowerPoint presentation and get and validate some statistics that we wanted to tell the potential investor. And for me, if I had my time again, I wouldn't recommend to say. I think we did a good job in that regard, and that was on the back of having a really good mentor. The fact that we didn't walk in and go, I need 500 grand. What do you think? This is the presentation. It was, we need a small amount of money. If we can validate the idea and present the concept to you in a month's time, and you still think that it's a good idea, then we'll take the rest and load up the account.
Well, we used to say we'll make room in the account. We were very measured with the process and made investors feel comfortable that, yeah, they could dip the toe in the water and then we hit these milestones, and then once we've done that ahead of time, which we always made sure we did, then they'd be, you know, rushing their hands out the next tranche, as I like to call it, in the investment world.